we're really getting to the close of Genesis here. So we left off in our story with Joseph, through his dreams, being a very important person in the land of Egypt. He's in charge of distributing the rations during this great time of famine. Jacob sent 10 of his sons down to get some food, and Joseph knows it's them, but they don't know it's Joseph. Okay? And so Joseph says, hey, do you have another brother? You know, obviously he knows the answer to this because he knows who they are, but they don't know him. And they say, well, yes. And he says, well, go back to where you came from and bring him here. I won't give you anything until you bring him here. And so they go and they get Benjamin, which was Jacob's second favorite child, because again, it was from his wife Rachel, his favorite wife. And they bring him back, and Joseph sees Benjamin, and he kind of excuses himself and goes and kind of breaks down, weeps after seeing his younger brother Benjamin. Then they decide to have a feast. And so they're having a meal together, and Joseph has a plan. He's going to have a guard plant some valuable possessions of the palace in Benjamin's bag. Okay, so that's what they do. Without them knowing, there's some valuable possessions placed in Benjamin's bag, and they're about to leave. And Joseph says, hey, wait a minute, and has the guards inspect Benjamin's bag, and sure enough, they find some of the material, the palaces, and Joseph accuses Benjamin of stealing from him, and Benjamin's going to face a very harsh and severe penalty, maybe even death. Now, here's the most important part in this whole cycle, okay? This is the climax of the story of Joseph. Judah, one of the brothers, steps up and pretty much says, I will take the blame for Benjamin. Okay? From that moment, from that story, we didn't get much of that. I wish we did, but we didn't get much of it in the first reading. But at that moment, that's when Joseph reveals himself to the other 11. I am Joseph, your brother. And so there's two things from this. First of all, whenever there's a kind of an act of sin, at least in what we've been watching in the Genesis cycle, not only does God forgive, but God also in a way kind of requires something from us. So when Abraham kind of took Hagar, the maidservant, and had Ishmael, God kind of rebuked Abraham. Look, trust me in this. You and Sarah will have a son. Well, what happened afterwards was circumcision. That became part of the covenant now. Okay. With Jacob, this whole idea of wrestling with God. Jacob deceived his father Isaac with the blessing. And so what happens is that Jacob is deceived by his uncle Laban. Okay. And that's how he marries Leah first. Okay. The ugly sister. All right. Then also you have that wrestling with God in the Jacob cycle when Jacob's hip is permanently damaged. He's walking with a limp for the rest of his life. And now here with the 11, or at least with 10 of the brothers, this idea of penance. And they accomplished that when Judah stepped up and said, you know what, no, I will take the place. Because he didn't want to bear the fact that he would have to go back to his father Jacob and say, well, we lost Benjamin now too. That act of penance, retribution. But most importantly, I think what Joseph says at the end, he says this, come closer to me, brothers. So he wants the brothers, after all they did to him, he still wants the brothers to come close to him. Do not be distressed and do not reproach yourselves for having sold me here. It was really for the sake of saving lives that God sent me ahead of you. Let that sink in. Of all the bad things that happened to Joseph, not just being sold into slavery, but he spent years in prison before he got to where he was. But he saw it as part of God's divine providence in all of it. It's hard to accept. It's not easy to accept, especially when we're in the moment right here of trial and suffering. To know that God's providential hand is on all of this. And of course, the greatest example of that is Jesus' death, right? That's That's the greatest example of Joseph's expression. It's really for the sake of saving lives that the Heavenly Father had his Son on the cross. It's for the sake of saving lives. So again, it's something that's not easy to accept, but it's a very, very profound and true spiritual insight on the part of Joseph. He forgave his brothers because there was a reason why he was here. And the reason why was to eventually save their lives. And everything that we go through, God's hand is with us through the good and through the suffering and through the trials. May God bless you.